Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. Today we have, I think, a really good topic that is germane to all of us. But first, I want to say hi to Jamie. How's it going?
Hi, glad to be here.
Good.
Glad to be
Uh,
here.
Today we're going to explore, I think, what is a critical topic, actually, and that is emotional regulation. So, understanding and managing our emotions is essential for anyone striving to overcome addiction, especially, and quite frankly, just to live well in this world among others. So,
Mhm.
today we are going to take a look at what emotional regulation is, why it's important, and practical strategies you can use to gain control over your emotions and in turn your eating habits, because those things are so closely correlated. Jamie, do you
Mhm.
want to add any of your thoughts to this as we get started?
Yeah, I think it's really important to just remind everyone that emotional regulation is really a two-part process, maybe even more. But the first is sort of becoming aware of our emotions and observing them, and then being able to identify those emotions, and then looking at, okay, how do I
Mhm.
regulate them? So it's not just something where we can flip a switch, now we're emotionally regulating ourselves. It's a process.
Yeah.
And that two critical parts of that regulation outcome to us, the two most critical parts before the regulation happens, is that awareness, right? And identification, right? Knowing that you have the emotion, or that you have some emotion about something,
Mhm.
and identifying it, and then looking at, okay, this emotion, the way it normally expresses, or I express it, is not helping me or the situation. So I need to think about how to regulate that, or use the
Yeah.
tools, or look at my environment or my diet that would help me regulate it more effectively. So I think it's a multi-step process.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I have to admit, I really didn't have a deep understanding of emotional regulation. I mean, I had an overall generalized idea, but not sure that I knew all the details and nuances surrounding it. But through my research on this topic, I found that I was making it more complicated than it really was. And emotional regulation simply refers to our ability to manage and respond to our emotional experiences in a healthy way. It's about recognizing our emotions, understanding what trigger them, and then finding effective ways to deal with them. And when we start to veer off this path, that's when things start getting tricky for those that are suffering from the effects of processed food, because we are using these ultra processed foods to numb and excite all at the same time. So, multi layers in there as well.
Absolutely. Really, if we think about, what many of the people that we work with use for emotional regulation, it's things outside of them. And that
Mhm.
certainly was my experience, was always things outside of me. I would try to
Right.
regulate others, right, via control. And I didn't think of it as controlling. I just thought of it as me trying to keep things a certain way outside of me so that I could feel better. But that is the crux of control, right? When we're pushing
Right.
our agenda on another person. So, or another situation, right? I would try to control situations or outcomes of situations so that I would feel okay. Again, all of those are ineffective coping skills. And a third way that many people try to sort of control their emotions is to use food or alcohol or other substances to control them. And we know that that is a very it's a short-term solution at best, and at worst, creates addiction.
Yeah.
So, and this is something that, again, so many people don't realize that they're even doing, because this use of food or substances or other people or other situations is so it's prolific, it's taught to people, it's modeled for them, it's marketed to them. I mean, it
Yeah.
really is, especially the food and the alcohol and the substances, they're marketed as ways to change people's moods or change their
Relax.
state. Yep, yep. Feel better, feel happy, relax. I mean, look at any of the ads for Coca-Cola or any of the ads for any
Right.
processed foods, and you'll find some, they're not selling you a food, they're selling you a lifestyle,
An
they're selling
emotion.
you an emotion, they're selling you an outlook, particular outlook on life, or on a relationship. And it's really, really insidious.
Yeah.
Paige, what's your experience with this?
Oh, right. I mean, when we talk about using processed food, it's only that's my only experience with processed food is I'm doing air quotes for those of you that can't see me of using it. I mean, with the least ounce of discomfort, I was straight to the sugar bowl. And honestly, I really didn't know there was any other way to cope. That these demons would just possess my body. I didn't know I had a choice. I just assumed I was a victim to it because I had zero skills to fight back. I felt powerless, literally powerless, like I was this victim. And quite frankly, I didn't even understand what was happening to me at the time. So even if I wanted to turn some place for help, I wouldn't even know where to go because I didn't understand the language. I didn't understand what was happening. What would I even Google? So until I started recovery and learned how the mind worked, I just assumed I had to do damage
Mhm.
control till the cravings would stop or all the processed food I had within my reach was gone. And but once I started in, it literally felt as if I was a puppet on a string with the addiction controlling my movements. On the inside, I was in this fetal position, begging for mercy, just waiting for the hurricane to pass. It really does feel like you're trapped inside your body, and it's traumatizing and terrifying because you don't know when it will be over. You don't know how much cleanup there will be involved afterwards, and it's just complete free fall. And I
Mhm.
might just add before I discovered there was a recovery community available for this, I didn't even know, again, air quotes, recovery for ultra processed food even existed or was a thing. And I've said this on other podcasts before. My girlfriends weren't, nobody was talking about this. I never had one other person in my 5.5 decades of life say this was happening to them at home. So what am I going to do? Tell somebody this is happening to me? It was too embarrassing. So totally ignorant of what was available out there, which makes me wonder how many other people are suffering needlessly because they don't know help is even available.
Well, and I guess I'm thinking about when I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about how so many women, like, that's my demographic that I can speak to. Women have fought their whole lives, against and for I'd say decades against the use of outside substances or things to feel better. And they didn't talk about the outcomes. They didn't talk about what it was doing to them. I mean, if I was thinking when you were talking about the images, right? Whether it's in movies or media, images of housewives in the 50s or 60s, sucking cigarettes at home and using that as emotional regulation
Right.
uh, for many different reasons, right? And of course, because of the addiction. But I think about that and I wonder, like, there had to be more than one woman out there during those cigarette years, 40s, 50s, 60s in the US anyway, and decades before that in other countries. I mean, how many women were like, sucking this smoke makes me cough and feel like I can't breathe right for an hour every morning when I wake up. Probably not the best thing to do for me, but it was something that literally the doctors would do. The doctors wouldn't talk about with them. Or if they brought it up to the doctor dismissed it as they were lighting up their own cigarette, right? Because it was everywhere. And if you look at the cigarette use in the mid 20th century, it is the exact same as what we're facing with processed foods.
Yeah.
It's everywhere in every single demographic from the birth to death. And doctors are so deep in their own food obsession,
Right.
food use, and food, relying on food to help them feel better and them cope with their day. So many doctors
Mhm.
that doctors will look at a patient if that patient says, doctor, this doesn't feel right that I'm, face deep into a bag of Cheetos every time my feelings get hurt. And the doctor's like, oh, well, I've got a bag of Doritos waiting for me, next patient, right? Like
Right.
they have the same issue.
Right.
And so again, I guess I just look at it as how could anyone really talk about what's going on? Because they're being told by the institutions that they trust that it's okay. So
Yeah, it's,
it's
sorry.
really, it's insidious.
Yeah, and it comes down a lot to education, doesn't it? You
Yes.
mentioned the smoking, and I was watching this Netflix series, and it was historically accurate. And in the beginning, the doctors in this OBGYN uh practice, they were smoking. I mean, this was 100 years ago, but the doctors are smoking, the
Mhm,
pregnant mothers are smoking, or they also drink alcohol while
mhm.
they're pregnant. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah,
had forgot that. I mean, they just didn't know. And
no,
so now here we are. You already made that connection with, here we are, fast forward with ultra
yes,
processed foods and all the damage it was doing. It's a grossly lack of education, but I think we're doing better at catching up. I think there's more and more education and enlightenment coming out. But one of the reasons that we developed RFR is because it's so painful for Jamie and I to see people suffering. It hurts. I feel it deep in my chest. And at
mhm,
RFR, we really want to be part of the solution. So I want to talk a little bit more about the connection between emotions and eating, and why emotions have such a powerful impact on our eating behaviors. You might be surprised to know that the answer lies in the brain. When we consume these highly processed foods, our brain release dopamine, this feel-good neurotransmitter that reinforces this behavior. So therein is the crux of the problem. The problem is it makes us want to repeat these behaviors when we get that immediate gratification and feel goods all at the same time. So over time, we start associating these foods with emotional relief, creating this cycle that makes it really hard to break.
yes, agreed. And again, all is not lost, right? Because when we learn to regulate our emotions, which is a learned experience and a practice
Mhm.
that we can do again and again, we can begin to break the cycle, right? And find healthier ways to cope. So let's talk about some practical strategies for emotional regulation. These
Yeah.
techniques can help you manage your emotions more effectively, reducing the urge to turn to food.
I agree. So the first one is mindfulness and meditation. Mindfulness just involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment. And meditation is a powerful tool for developing this mindfulness. Even if it's just a few minutes a day, that can help you become more aware of your emotional triggers and responses. There are apps that can guide you through simple meditation practices. And I have to add a little bit about meditation. I have fought that forever because I've always struggled with ADD. And the good news is that I have learned about active meditation so I can do it while I'm walking or exercising. So that works out so much better for me that way. And I always feel completely different after a workout.
Yeah. Yep. Second one is deep breathing exercises. I'll be honest, guys. If I'm using processed food, deep breathing is a joke. It doesn't work. But again, because I'm literally addicted to a chemical substance in a ultra processed food. So, I mean, that's just my experience. Maybe there's some people out there that can put a donut down and take a few deep breaths and not pick the donut back up, but I don't know any of them.
You need to
Uh,
blow through the hole, breathe through the hole.
yeah. So, I think this is an, again, I hear experts talk about this, and I think if someone is not in the food, like meaning not consuming ultra processed food, when I say in the food, I mean not consuming ultra processed foods. I think that deep breathing is extremely valuable, very effective, very useful in like so many ways, right? It's regulating from sympathetic to parasympathetic. It takes us out of fight or flight and brings the blood back to the frontal lobe, all the things. But
Mhm.
again, if you're halfway through a Pizza Hut pizza, some deep
Yeah.
breaths are not going to keep you from finishing that pizza
Mm-mm.
if you really want to.
The horses have left the barn.
Yes, exactly. So again, I like that it's in this list though, because what if we tried some deep breathing before we're using the food, right? What if we look at how we can emotionally regulate our sympathetic nervous system? Again, fight or flight, moving back towards frontal lobe, cognitive power that's actually, you know, much more critically thought out instead of just reacting to an emotion. So yes, very effective, I think, before the food comes in the picture.
That's right. And that is exactly what I was going to say is all these things that we're suggesting are when we talk about practicing, these are things that we just want to do on a regular daily basis to build up those reserves when these opportunities come. So that great point, huge point.
Yeah.
Emotional journaling, writing down thoughts and feelings can be incredibly therapeutic. And journaling helps you process emotions, identify patterns, and understand your triggers. And over time, this practice can reduce the intensity of your emotional responses. We just recorded a podcast on journaling recently, and it really opened my eyes to the different ways to effectively use journaling in recovery. And I'm going to share something that Jamie taught me that day. She suggested that using the notes part in your phone, if you have an iPhone, I don't know if it's the same on every phone, but you write down the feelings you experience after consuming processed food or having a binge. That was so enlightening. And I did it the minute we were finished recording. And you could also do the opposite. You could write down how you feel if you stick to clean, non-processed foods. It's the same effect. But Jamie was just talking about access to their frontal lobe. When these cravings come on, it's hard to think straight. But if you have something already written down, you could more easily go to this place in your phone as a reminder of how you're going to feel if you get into the foods. And sometimes that's helpful. Another thing, I just happened to have a conversation with someone today. They were watching some History Channel or biography, somebody being interviewed, and they were talking about Jesuit journaling, where they, at the end of the day, they would replay their day, go through their day again, and write down everywhere that God touched their life, or at least three things, three times during the day that they
Beautiful.
stopped to recognize where God, or you could say the universe, was some powerful positive influence in your life affected your life. And I thought that, wow, that what a healing, beautiful,
Mhm.
yummy, soul filling way to do. And that's a little bit of emotional journaling too.
Yep. And in the 12-step world, again, this is not something that we're recommending across the board. There's some great things about 12 steps and there's some not so great things. So we like to, say, take what you like and leave the rest when it comes to 12-step recovery. But one of the things that I loved from the 12-step time that I spent was the evening time, right? The reflections in the evening, which it
Mm-hmm.
could have been easily used over a journal, where you sat down and thought, okay, where have I been, really positive today? Where have I not really been my best self today? And do I have to, what prayer or time with God do I have to spend? What reflection needs to be made? What changes need to be looked at, looking in the mirror, and maybe even what repairs, right? Or apologies do I have to give?
Yeah.
uh, if there really was something egregious that happened throughout that day. And it kind of, again, when I've done it where I've just sort of thought about it, I've done it where I've written it out, and either way, it's very effective as a reflection point before you go to bed. Another emotional writing exercise could be, intentions, reflection and intention setting. So you're reflecting on your day, and then you're setting your intentions for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So physical activity is probably my go-to,
Mm-hmm.
when, especially if I found myself back in ultra processed or processed food, I would, just to break the pattern of going back for food that I know I wasn't hungry for. Physical activity always worked. Um, and when I don't mean going out for a run necessarily, although if that's your thing, great. I would just leave the house and change my location and go for a walk, or go hop on, if it's bad weather outside, go hop on a treadmill and just move. Because when I'm moving and I am, um again, getting the blood flow, that blood flow in my brain goes from fight or flight, amygdala, emotional response, to back to that frontal lobe where I can critically think. And it reminds me, okay, I'm really not hungry, I just am feeling overwhelmed and stressed, so I'm going to hop on this treadmill and or hop outside for some movement outside, after work or after a stressful conversation. And it keeps me much more connected to the things that I want to do for me instead of food that doesn't do anything for me.
Right. Yeah, agree completely. And that's a big one for me too. It's my lifeline. I've got to have it every day. Some sort of something. I agree with you completely. The last one we want to talk about is social support. Connecting with others who understand what you're going through can provide a great amount of emotional relief and support. So, I mean, that is high on the list at Real Food Recovery. We really bond over these shared experiences, and especially when we're in a tight spot. So consider joining a support group, whether it's in person or online, where you can share your experiences and learn from others, which again is exactly what we do at RFR. It's amazing the power of connectedness and feeling like you are not alone in the process. You can't begin to measure the strength that comes from connection. During the writing of this podcast, I was actually struggling with some bad cravings of a result of a triggering situation around me. So I sent a message out to our leaders, Jamie, and our other leader, Shay, just to let them know I'm letting you guys know here's what's going on. And I'm just touching base and I'm letting you know this is what I'm doing to handle the situation for myself. And they both responded immediately, which provided this extra layer of reinforcement. And I felt so much better. And I was able to safely work my way through that wobbly moment that creeped up unexpectedly and took me off guard. I mean, I had a plan, but just letting them know that I had a plan and them reinforcing that what I was doing really like doubled the strength. It was just like extra layers of armor around me. And I felt so much better after using these skills. And just, I let those emotions just work right through me. And I was able to giddy up on down the road.
Yes, very, very important. The last one is a healthy distraction. So again, an activity that you do that you love to do. For me, it is anything else with my hands that doesn't involve food. So you can look at musical instruments, you can look at knitting, you can look at crafting, page crafts with scrapbooks. I love my djembe drums. I love drumming and creating music and all of
I
that.
didn't know that.
Yes. I don't think I'm very good, but I enjoy doing it, and it's definitely an emotional regulation tool for me.
What, what, what kind of drums did you say?
The djembe
What
looks
does
like
that mean?
an African, it's an African, I don't know what the word means, but
Is it bongos? Is that the
nope,
same as?
it's a taller floor drum.
Ah,
Got like a great bass, more of a bass sound, less of a higher pitch like a bongo would be.
why am I just finding out about this? This is big news. This is breaking news.
You see a lot of drumming circles. It's my dream one day to host a drumming circle in my little conservative Texas town. Who knows? Never know what'll happen.
Oh gosh. Well, implementing these strategies can feel overwhelming at first,
Mhm.
especially if you've relied on food for emotional comfort for a long time. So start small. We always say start small. You don't have to do everything at once, and choose one or two of these strategies that resonate with you, and gradually you can incorporate them into your daily routine where it just normally becomes a part of your day. Consistency is the key, and over time these practices will become second nature. And I've used all of these from time to time, but the biggest one I rely on is simply to pause. I always give myself 2 to 3 days to process things. That is my biggest tool. Just sit with my feelings, let it marinate, give myself time to look at things from every angle, think it through before I do or say anything. Jamie, do you use any of these to help you when your emotions are running high, or do you have something else you do that stands out more?
Um, I have used those strategies for sure. And again, when I think about ways that I cope with emotional stress, I just go right to God and I pray about it, or I ask for clarity, or I ask for for wisdom or discernment, or I ask for help holding my tongue, which is probably something more often than anything for me. you know, I tend to ask for help so that I don't get myself in a situation where I have to make an apology. If I'm feeling frustrated, right? And again, those are things that it's been so long since I've used food to cope with emotion that I have these other things that I try to rely on more than I ever, would turn back to the food for
Yeah.
these days.
Yeah. So remembering that emotional regulation is a journey. It's not a destination. And it's very helpful to remember that it is just a journey because it takes a lot of pressure off of being perfect and being perfect right now. So be patient with yourself and recognize that every small step you take is progress. And by learning to manage your emotions, you're building this strong foundation for overcoming the effects of processed food addiction and creating a healthier, more balanced life. So don't forget, you have the power to change your story.
That's well said. Well said. So we have a few listener questions, and I like that this is a topic that I think people are very curious about.
Mhm.
So these questions that came in are really, I think they're good reflection questions. The first one is, do you really think emotions play a role in your relationship with food? I am not convinced. I just think I get cravings. It has nothing to do with how I feel. So I think there's probably a couple different ways to look at that. I don't actually disagree with that.
I
Uh,
know.
and I think that there are, because of the way that our bodies react to chemicals in these processed and ultra processed foods, I think that there is a withdrawal that happens, a withdrawal that comes from these ultra processed foods that our body literally begins to crave them again. So I don't think that's actually inaccurate. And
Mhm.
on top of that withdrawal and the symptoms of withdrawal comes true emotional needs that people use food as an answer for. So again, it's a double-edged sword, which is why to regulate emotion or to even have a chance at identifying and being aware of your emotions, doing everything you can to get those foods out of your life, out of the house. And please don't waste our time with my kids eat these foods, so I have to have them in the house. I know no
Right.
6-year-old with a job and a car and an ability to go shop at their grocery store for themselves. Like, please don't use that excuse about your children because it's BS. It is your responsibility as a parent to keep foods in the house that promote wellness and health for your children and for you. And you're the only one who can do it. There's no 6-year-old holding a gun to a mom's head saying, if you don't buy me my
Mhm.
Cheerios, Honey Nut Cheerios, I'm gonna, go ballistic on you. Right? It
Yeah.
just doesn't happen. So let's be honest with ourselves, get those foods out as much as we can out of our own home environments, because we can't control the rest of the world, but we sure can control our home.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I agree. And I'll just add one thing. This weekend was literally filled with processed food from Friday afternoon till Sunday
Mhm.
afternoon in my face. I mean, every Halloween um candy, every cupcake, every dessert. It was literally every waking moment. And I just thought, I
Lot.
do a lot better when I am just not constantly having to fight off everything, when I can just be in a controlled environment and I'm so much more relaxed. And it is triggering and it's hard. And I start getting twitchy when it's around me and all over me all weekend long. So I agree with you. I hear the next question is, I hear a lot about how negative emotions influence your food choices, but what about positive, joyful, exciting emotions? Sometimes those are even harder when it comes to my food choices. So first of all, I don't disagree with that statement either. It's a great point. Holidays, birthdays, anniversaries, basically celebrations of any kind can be extremely difficult to navigate. That celebratory feeling can trick our brain into falling back into these old patterns of how we recognize these life events. And usually food is at the heart of most of these occasions. Like, the moment doesn't count unless there's a cake to mark the moment. So the question becomes, what do you do about it? The good news is you get to know in advance that these occasions are coming and you have time to plan, prepare, and visualize how you want to handle the situation. Literally pre-dial in, this is how I'm going to handle the situation. and it works like a charm. Perhaps you can bring a dish to add to the party or excuse yourself to the bathroom when the dessert is flowing. You can always eat before and join after dinner. You might even have a recovery buddy that you text throughout the evening to stay accountable and try very hard to go into the situation with a desire to get to know something about someone you never knew before. So you get the drift. It's changing the mindset of what you're doing there, which changes outcomes. But what's most important is to plan ahead and let your brain know what to expect. And then all that's left is to execute your plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Third question, how do you differentiate between physical hunger and emotional hunger?
Mhm.
A good question, and something that many of us struggle with, and I certainly struggled with. Um, I would say physical hunger is something that you would eat anything, even the things that you would never consider as highly palatable or fun or interesting or a party food. Like, again, because I'm sort of on this elimination diet journey. For me, I ask myself, would I eat a cold steak right now? Would I eat a cold hamburger right now? Would I eat something that is, a single ingredient, not prepared, you know, to be palatable or cooked or, not cooked, but warmed? And am I hungry enough to eat that? Right? Food out of the fridge without warming it up and without seasoning it, would I eat that? And
Yeah.
if the answer is yes, then that's hunger. I know
Yeah.
we have talked to, Dr. Joel Furman, and there's other experts out there who talk about where physical hunger is felt in the body. Some believe it's felt in the stomach, some believe it's felt in the back of the throat, some believe it's truly felt, in other parts of the body. I think everyone's a little different in some ways, and how they recognize physical hunger. But I tend to look at if it's within 4 hours of a meal. And I know that I've had that my meal was not smaller, my activity level wasn't bigger that day, then it's probably emotional hunger. Like if I'm hungry again an hour after my meal, there's two reasons for it. Either I didn't eat enough or something emotional is on my mind or
Hmm.
in my, stuck for me, emotionally. So I'll have to look at that. Again, it's nuanced because there could be days where and weekends, you have an active weekend or you're out and about and you're going and going, and then you'll be more hungry on that Monday following or that day following. And that is totally normal. And you will be out of character. It will be out of your cycle of hunger. Um, and that will be maybe a surprise to some people. Like, whoa, why am I hungry? I just, I know I ate my normal meal and I'm hungry and it's not even, 2 hours after my meal and I know it's physical hunger. What am I doing? Look at your activity level and don't judge and don't get, short tempered with yourself. Just look at it as, okay, this is feedback. My body needs more food.
Yeah.
So again, there's so many of us, myself included, that have this disordered background with food. And we tend to get very judgmental and shameful, or, we tend to judge ourselves uh, about if we're hungry outside of meal times, because we usually think it's emotional. And sometimes it's really not emotional. So we have to really learn to know ourselves, and learn to observe our cues in what's going on in our bodies.
Mhm.
Some would say if it's a hunger that's from the neck up, right? If you're thinking about the food, you're not feeling anything below the neck, some would say that that's emotional hunger.
Right.
And if you're feeling in your body a physical sensation of any kind, right? Throat, chest, stomach, anything that's physical sensation below the neck, that's physical hunger, right? And
Mhm.
I think that those are really good guidelines as well.
Yeah, I agree. Great answer. I love that. Next one, when you're feeling overwhelmed, what are some productive ways to regain emotional balance? We talk a lot about this at RFR, and overwhelm tells us a sneaky story that everything has to be done right now. And that is just simply not true. So when I feel that coming on, I make a priority list and decide what truly has to be done right then and what can wait till tomorrow or later that day. And it's very calming to make a list and prioritize your to-dos. I needed to make my breakfast shakes and my salads, and I needed to get that done 2 hours ago. Today's been very busy, nonstop, back-to-back meetings, and so I didn't get it done. But I am, instead of feeling overwhelmed, I've got a new plan B, which I always say recovery's in plan B, about when I can fit one thing in tonight and then one thing in tomorrow and get back on track. So yeah, just going to plan B and figuring out the next best thing to do.
Next question, what role does self-compassion play in emotional regulation during food recovery? I would say it's a big role. If there's nobody else, unfortunately, there's no compassion fairy. Nobody's going to come and give us compassion. We have to, it's an inside job. We have to do it for ourselves. So I would say that it's critical to give ourselves that self-compassion, especially when we're in food recovery or recovery of any kind. And this listener says, I'm wondering if being kinder to myself during moments of emotional difficulty might help. Yes, absolutely. Again, this is an inside job. Nobody's going to come and do that for you. Even if you have the most amazing family or friend, or you have a wonderful partner in life, there might be wonderful people and truly love and care about you, but they might not, they're not mind readers, and they're not inside your head to know what your needs are at that moment. So get really good at being your own source of compassion and love. And I think get really good at being your own best friend, because that will carry you a lot further when you're looking for things outside of yourself, like food, to make you feel better. The other thing that I would say is, again, this isn't about religion, but spiritually, getting right with a spiritual practice of some kind, whether it's a religion from your past, religious practices from your past, or a spiritual practice that you are learning today in the present, anything in between. If you can get a spiritual connection going, that will bring you a lot of peace, and you won't have to reach outside of yourself.
Yeah, I love that. I'm sorry, but I was laughing about the fairy, the self-compassion fairy, because we're in the tooth fairy phase right now because of my grandkids' teeth are falling out of their head right and left. And so we're in the tooth fairy. So I was thinking about a fairy coming in the night and slipping some compassion under your pillow. Wouldn't that be great? That's what we need to start a new compassion fairy business and
it will
fly around at night and deliver compassion.
People need it. People need it.
I know.
But they have to give it to themselves, right?
Yeah, you have to slip it under your own pillow. Okay, last one. What boundaries can you set for yourself to prevent emotional dysregulation from leading to a food relapse? Great question. I love this question because when we are upset, it feels like everything is an emergency. I'm sure everyone has experienced that. When you're upset, everything is at a 10. So for me, and I touched on this earlier, but a boundary might be telling yourself that I do not make immediate decisions unless the house is on fire. And so slow everything down, just literally go into slow motion. So sit with your thoughts and allow the adult part of you to run the show. And adults slow things down and look at things logically. So that's one good sign to know if you're in the adult part of your brain. But reacting on impulse rarely works out well for us. And when you do, then you potentially have that inner child or even a rebellious teen making your decisions. And we never want them to be in charge of adult lives. So slowing things down would be a non-negotiable for me. That would be a boundary.
We don't want our inner child or our inner teen to make those decisions for us. And many times people have those parts of their inner family systems running their lives and don't even know it.
You can pick them out, right? You can pick people out that are in that way.
Yes, I was just talking to somebody last night, and they were sharing something, and I remember thinking, oh my gosh, like your inner child is running the show right now. And I felt compassion for them because I've been there and I get it. And also it was so clear that, like, if you could look at this from a loving adult perspective, you would see it totally differently. And it was
Mhm.
affecting, it was a couple friends of ours, and it deeply affects their marriage, and they're reaching out for help, doing all the right things, and which is wonderful. But it's also like, oh my gosh, please, please, please do some inner family work because it would really help you. So.
Did you point that out to them? I was just curious if there was a shift in the conversation. If you
Unfortunately, we typically go out, all of us, after dinner, or excuse me, after the meeting for dinner, and they didn't join us, but I would have definitely liked to bring that topic up, but maybe another time. We'll see what the universe presents me.
Yeah,
With.
and so many, I've had a few conversations about interfamily work recently and talking about how we can talk to our different parts and communicate back and forth. And people have just been fascinated. They're unaware of the interfamily and the adult and the teen
Yeah,
and the child and things like that. So very, very helpful, especially in recovery, to be able to have
more.
conversations within yourself.
I couldn't agree more.
You want to add anything else before we finish up?
No, I think this is a great topic. Again, it's critical in recovery, and also it's critical to understand that when we're in that ultra processed and processed food, it's going to be you're human, and you're in the throes of a chemical addiction. It's going to be very hard to practice some of these principles when you're in the food.
Right.
So it's really important to be aware of it so that when you're not in the food, or you haven't gotten into the food that day yet, if let's say that you're on a cycle of eating it every day, and you noticing that you're having a clarity of mind moment, that's the time to start to parse this out and say, okay, I'm going to practice some emotional regulation, and see how that does around your cravings and some of the foods that you're choosing. And also, I think when you realize emotional regulation can be buoyed or fostered by choosing whole, single ingredient, unprocessed foods, that it's kind of a game changer. Well, it's not kind of, it is a game changer.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, this has been great. And if you want to know more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U, and we hope to see you there. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.